Brand origins is made possible by Partisan. Only one company can claim to be the oldest conglomerate in the Philippines, having been around since the Spanish colonial period. Ayala Corporation has played a big role in the development of the country, and if you're living here in the Philippines, it's safe to say that you have probably used or encountered at least one brand owned by the Ayala Group. They've been around for so long and have built a sizable business, and impressively, one that has successfully thrived beyond 3 generations. So, let's get straight to it and get to know the brand origin story of the Ayala Corporation. Ayala was established in 1834. During this period, the Philippines was still under Spanish colonial rule. It is important to note that Spain ruled the Philippines for 333 years, and for the most part, the Philippine colony was not profitable. It wasn't until the late 1850s when Spain started investing in infrastructure, education, and industry when things started to pick up. So now enter these folks: Domingo Rojas and Antonio de Ayala, the founding partners of CASA Rojas. Today, we know it as the Ayala Corporation, but when it was founded, it was called CASA Rojas. Eventually, this would be changed to CASA Ayala, followed by the name change to Ayala y Compañía, or the Ayala Company, and finally into the Ayala Corporation. CASA Rojas is considered as the first company to be established in the Philippines. During the Spanish colonial rule, as the Philippines started to develop, demand for liquor started to grow. Domingo Rojas and Antonio de Ayala saw this growth opportunity in this industry and started their first venture, which was in the distillery space, where they invested most of their assets in the Ayala Distillery in 1834. The Ayala Distillery is the first distillery in the Philippines. The company produced a wide variety of drinks, most notably cognac, rum, whiskey, and of course, gin. The gin that they produced was originally tailored to the taste of visiting Europeans and Filipino elites. This specific brand is none other than the present-day Ginebra San Miguel, which was also known as the Ginebra Ayala and the Ginebra Nacional at that time. If you're unaware, today, Ginebra San Miguel is an incredibly powerful brand and is a massive company. Now, eventually, the Ayala Distillery was acquired by La Tondena in 1924. La Tondena was owned by the Filipino-Chinese mestizo entrepreneur Carlos Palanca Sr. Although the Ayala Distillery was the first distillery in the country, La Tondena is considered as the oldest distillery. It remains as the oldest because it is still active. And that's because La Tondena was acquired by the San Miguel Corporation in 1987 and was renamed as the Ginebra San Miguel Inc. The name change highlights its flagship brand, Ginebra San Miguel. We'll talk about this more in another episode when I cover the San Miguel Corporation. Going back, considering the success of Ginebra San Miguel, I'm sure that this acquisition wasn't cheap. And although we have no data as to what the numbers are, I'm sure CASA Rojas was able to reap significant capital at this point. While they were still operating the Ayala Distillery, they entered another industry that was growing in the country: banking. In 1851, a Spanish royal decree established a bank in the Philippines, El Banco Español Filipino de Isabela II, named appropriately because it was during the rule of Queen Isabella II of Spain. This bank is considered as the first bank in the Philippines and Southeast Asia's first private commercial bank. The bank was established due to the development of the financial sector in the Philippines. You see, things were starting to pick up. For most of the 333-year rule of Spain, the economy of the colony was fueled by Spain's exploitation of the agricultural resources of the Philippines, which is kind of what they were doing in their other colonies as well. This led to the rise of a new economy. Demand for abaca, a textile fiber crop, and coconut oil started to rise, and trade in general started picking up. Foreign trade made up 30% of the country's GDP. And so naturally, to go along with the demand, merchants started to need financing. Aside from this, the rise in business activities led to an increase in the money supply in the Philippines. One of the problems it was intended to solve was for the usage of a single currency. Because since before 1851, many currencies were used. And so, the bank was established and was given the power to print the Philippine peso. Sure enough, Antonio de Ayala, since he was already actively involved in the business community in Manila, he was assigned to represent them, becoming the director of the bank. The bank functioned as the Philippines' central bank up until the 1900s when independence from Spain was declared, and an actual central bank was established. Fun fact, the bank's first branch established outside of Manila was in Iloilo in 1897. Now, from its foundation until 1912, the bank functioned as a quasi-government bank, meaning the government was involved in running the bank. But in 1912, when the Philippines was starting to make a move on gaining autonomy from the United States, Bangko Espanyol Filipino was officially privatized, changing its name to the now familiar Bank of the Philippine Islands, or simply BPI. Important note, apparently, even though Antonio de Ayala was the director and was involved in the operations of BPI since its foundation, the Ayalas didn't actually own the bank right there and then. I'm guessing that they own shares, but it's not until December 1969 when the Ayala Corporation officially became the majority shareholder of BPI. The bank would then become its flagship company in all of the Ayala Corporation's financial entities. And as of 2019, in terms of assets, BPI is the 4th largest bank in the Philippines. So here's the thing. Normally, I go through brands a company owns in a chronological order, usually based on when they were founded. But when it comes to a company as big as Ayala, it's difficult to do it this way. So I'll just go through its brands in no particular order. And next on the list is Globe Telecom. Globe Telecom is a major telecommunications provider in the Philippines. Globe and its rival PLDT have been fighting for the top spot since their foundation. I am aware that Ayala owns Globe but wasn't really so sure about whether they started the company or if they just invested in it. Well, apparently, Globe started out in 1928 when the Congress of the Philippines granted the Robert Dollar Company, a corporation from the state of California, a franchise that allowed it to operate wireless long-distance message services in the Philippines. The company was first named as Globe Wireless Limited and then later on changed to Globe Mackay Cable and Radio Corporation. Ayala entered the picture in 1974 when the Ayala Corporation acquired 60% of Globe Mackay. As the demand rose for telecommunication services for both international and domestic, in 1992, Globe Mackay merged with the Clavicilla Radio Corporation to form GMCR. It's at this point when they changed the name from GMCR into Globe Telecom Inc., or simply Globe. Here's the thing. Regarding the ownership of Globe, well, the Ayala Corporation owns 30% of Globe's common shares, and the Singtel Group owns 47% of it. Singtel, or Singapore Telecom Inc., partnered up with Globe in 1993. Here's where I got a bit confused. We all know that a foreign company can only own 40% of a company here in the Philippines. So why does the Singtel Group have 47% of common shares? If you're unaware of the difference, well, common stock has voting rights. So if the company needs to make decisions, if you have common shares, you get to have a say in those decisions. Cool. Anyway, so Singtel owns 47% of Globe. Now, to offset this, corporations in the Philippines apply this one trick. They issue a new type of stock called preferred shares. Preferred shares get dividends but have no voting rights. So in Globe's case, 100% of preferred shares are owned by a company called Asiacom. So what they do is that they issue a lot of preferred shares to dilute the total number of shares. The loophole is that the Constitution simply counts the percentage based on the shares you own divided by the total number of shares, regardless of what type of shares. And so, even though the Singtel Group owns 47% of common stock, effectively giving them majority control of the company, if you add in the preferred stock, on paper, it dilutes the 47% into 20%. And that is the magical creativity of corporations here in the Philippines. It is cheeky, but I'm pretty sure that Ayala is not the only company that is taking advantage of this loophole. And the best part is, the company that owns 100% of Globe's preferred shares is Asiacom, which is 60% owned by Ayala and 40% owned by the Singtel Group. Bottom line is, Globe is controlled by the Singapore-based Singtel Group and Ayala Corporation. It is one of Ayala Corporation's most profitable ventures and is probably one of its best investments thus far. It is big, but let's move on to something bigger, Makati City. The Ayala name is very well associated with the growth of Makati. Even though Manila is the capital of the Philippines, Makati is considered as the financial center of the country as it has the highest concentration of multinational and local corporations in the country. When global corporations enter the Philippines, their first stop is to set up their headquarters in Makati. It is also where the Philippine Stock Exchange is located, as well as several foreign embassies. So let's go back to 1851. In 1851, Don Jose Bonifacio Rojas acquired the vast Jesuit estate called the Hacienda San Pedro de Makati for 52,800 pesos. Don Jose Bonifacio Rojas is related to the Zobel de Ayala family. This is how they got the property. Now, we fast forward to 1937. Lori Nielsen, an entrepreneur and aviation enthusiast, wanted to take the opportunity to build an airport in the Philippines. Business was booming in the country, and Nielsen felt that it was the best time to push through with this project. The managing partner of Ayala y Compañía at that time, Enrique Zobel de Ayala, heard about this project, and so he offered a portion of the hacienda to Nielsen, proposing that Makati is the perfect location since it is adjacent to Manila and is nothing but open fields. The construction of this airport is important to Ayala's history because it almost cost them to lose the whole of Makati. You see, eventually, Nielsen Airport became an aviation school, specifically the American Far Eastern School of Aviation. At the dawn of World War II, when Japan's intentions became more and more apparent, the United States turned the aviation school into the headquarters of the Far East Air Force. When the Japanese invaded the Philippines, the airport was taken. The Imperial Army of Japan used this as a staging point for their air force. In the summer of 1943, they summoned the owners of the property, the Ayalas, to turn over the estate permanently by way of a coerced sale. The Japanese demanded that it be sold to them, putting the Ayalas in a terrible position, especially since the passing of the family patriarch, Don Enrique Zobel de Ayala, the grandfather of the current Ayala brothers Jaime Augusto and Fernando Zobel de Ayala. The family's generational wealth, which took almost a century to build, was fast diminishing, and losing Hacienda San Pedro de Makati will be a killing blow to their wealth. Luckily, there's Don Alfonso Zobel de Ayala, the sole managing partner during this whole affair. He was known as a mild-mannered person, but he was unflinching against the demands of the Japanese as they negotiated the sale of the property. Don Alfonso would endure weeks of being summoned to these one-sided negotiations, taking all the threats and abuse from the Japanese. Don Alfonso knew that the sale of this property to the Japanese was inevitable, and he knew that all he could do is to delay the transaction. Luckily for him, the Empire of Japan granted Philippine independence on October 1943, installing a puppet government instead. The stalling pays off, and the Ayalas retained control of the vast estate. Had Don Alfonso given in to his temper or changed his strategy, Makati would look very different today. Because if the sale was completed, it would have become Japanese property. And when the Americans liberated Manila, that property would have been turned over to the government, leaving us without the Makati we now know today. After World War II, despite the destruction that the conflict has brought upon Makati, the real estate boom happens. Nielsen Field was closed down, and the entire area was passed on to the owners, the Ayalas, and plans were set to develop a central business district that will rival the best in Southeast Asia. Gated communities such as San Lorenzo, San Antonio, Bel Air villages started growing into commercial areas and office parks. In 1949, part of the Nielsen Airport runway were converted into roads, becoming the now well-known Ayala Avenue. Today, having an office address with Ayala Avenue on it is a prestigious status symbol for a company. I got curious as to how much the value of land is in the most prime areas of Makati, and according to Philstar, in 2018, it can reach up to 695,000 pesos per square meter, whereas in BGC, it's around 586,000 pesos per square meter. This area was even labeled as the Wall Street of the Philippines, and it's quite fitting since in 1963, the Makati Stock Exchange was established, eventually becoming the Philippine Stock Exchange in 1992. And so this is how Makati became the first modern central business district of the Philippines. Ayala Corporation would experience tremendous success when it comes to real estate, starting only out as a division and eventually being consolidated into a whole other company, Ayala Land. Ayala Land is by far still the most profitable company across Ayala Corporation's portfolio and is one of the top 3 real estate companies in the Philippines. It has brought in a net income of 31.8 billion pesos in 2018 And due to the recent rise in demand for new properties and commercial leasing, this is expected to further increase. Amid the growing hospitality industry, Ayala Land's chain of hotels in Seda Hotels now has 11 Seda properties around the country. And Ayala Land is also doing big moves abroad, increasing their stake in MCT Berhad, a developer in Malaysia, taking a majority 66% stake in the company. The company said that they see the similarities of the Malaysian market and the Philippines, and since they have the necessary expertise in this field, the MCT Berhad ownership will be their springboard into Malaysia. Ayala Land, through MCT Berhad, now has acquired a 3.75 hectare property in Klang Valley, Malaysia. With their success in developing Makati into a central business district, in 2003, Ayala Land, in partnership with Evergreen Holdings, acquired 50.4% of Bonifacio Global City, or BGC as we know it. BGC was planned to be the up-and-coming area that was bound to eclipse what they were able to do in Makati. Ayala Land became one of the two major partners with the rights to develop the 57-hectare area. Their vision to replicate their success in Makati has definitely been achieved, since BGC is one of the top financial centers in the Philippines. Just like Makati, BGC has become the home of many headquarters of global brands as well as foreign embassies. Ayala Land is quite confident in their ability to create these business districts, and so they've continued to acquire multiple hectares of lands in developing regions, with the likes of their Nuvali project in Laguna, which aims to become the first sustainable city in the Philippines, and the 74-hectare Arca South, hailed as the next BGC. Unsurprisingly, Ayala Land is also in the development of malls under their subsidiary Ayala Malls. Ayala Land has so many divisions under it, but the basic setup is this. Ayala Land will acquire several hectares of land in key metropolitan areas, be it in Manila or in the provinces. Then, they'll build their condominiums, office spaces, put up a Seda hotel branch, put up a hospital under the Ayala-owned QualiMed, make sure that the Ayala-owned BPI branch is strategically located, and lastly, have an Ayala Mall in the middle of all this. It is a glorious mix of complementary brands under the Ayala banner, and it's been working out for them so far. There are so many other companies under Ayala Corporation that we won't have time to go through in detail one by one, but I'm going to just go blaze through most of them just so that you have a grasp as to how big Ayala is. Ayala Corporation's healthcare arm is called AC Health. In the making of this episode, Ayala Corporation completed the acquisition of Healthway Philippines. Healthway has 7 mall-based clinics and 40 corporate clinics. It is now part of AC Health's portfolio that includes Generika Drugstore, Family Doc, MedGrocer, and Aid. The Ayala Group also partnered up with the MERCADO General Hospital to form QualiMed, their brand of hospital chains that aims to have 20 locations in the Philippines by 2020. Seeing the rise of the e-commerce landscape in the Philippines, in 2017, AC Ventures acquired a 49% stake in ZALORA Philippines, an online shopping website that houses over 1,000 brands. A year after the ZALORA acquisition, Entrego Fulfillment Solutions Inc. was launched. This is a partnership between Ayala and the group that owns ZALORA, the global fashion group. It's a 60-40 joint venture that required Ayala to invest over 2 billion pesos. Apparently, Entrego just started out as the fulfillment division of ZALORA, but eventually ended up becoming an independent company. And now that Entrego is under Ayala Corporation, it now goes head-to-head with other logistics companies such as LBC and AP Cargo. Under AC Industrials, the manufacturing and car dealership arm of Ayala Corp, we have the Integrated Microelectronics Inc., or simply IMI. IMI was launched in 1980 by Ayala Corporation and Resins Inc. Today, the company has over 20 manufacturing sites and over 16,000 employees across 8 countries. They make a wide array of parts, which include circuit boards, electronic parts for vehicles, medical diagnostic devices, and a whole lot of other custom-built parts. Now, for the car dealership division, part of Ayala's portfolio here is their ownership of Volkswagen Philippines, Honda Cars Makati and Cebu, and a minority stake in ISUZU Philippines. In December of 2018, AC Industrials became the official distributor of Kia cars in the Philippines. Under the Ayala Corporation Energy Holdings are investments in companies that run solar farms and diesel plants. In December 2019, the company announced that it will be investing up to 1.8 billion pesos in a 120 megawatt solar farm in Laguna. They've also invested in a 350 megawatt diesel plant in Rizal. It doesn't stop there. we also have the AC Infrastructure, which is the group's subsidiary for road, rail, and airport projects under the government's Public-Private Partnership Program. They're involved in the development of the Muntinlupa-Cavite Expressway, parts of the LRT, and the North Avenue Grand Central Station. These are just a couple of the major projects they're involved in. Some of these require them to partner up with other big development firms because these projects require up to tens of billions of pesos to manage. And lastly, we have Manila Water. Manila Water was launched by Ayala Corporation in 1997. Both Maynilad and Manila Water won the bidding for the exclusive rights to provide water and used water services for the entire east zone of Metro Manila, which consists of 23 cities and municipalities, which numbers around 7 million people. That's guaranteed earnings for Ayala Corporation. But despite this, when you compare the group's earnings to their other companies, it actually seems relatively smaller. According to the 2018 income report of Ayala Corp, Manila Water only brought in a net income of 6.5 billion pesos. And yes, it's not often that I get to say only and billion in the same sentence. Now, compare that 6.5 billion pesos to their biggest source of income, Ayala Land, which brought in over 29 billion pesos, Globe Telecom, which brought in over 18 billion pesos, or BPI, which had a net income of over 23 billion pesos. As for the other companies, AC Energy had a net income of 4.1 billion pesos, AC Industrials brought in 578 million, and AC Motors brought in only 164 million pesos. The main takeaway is this: Ayala Corporation is massive. I don't think you can last a day without getting in touch with a product or service that Ayala Corp hasn't been a part of. But you know what? Maybe this isn't such a bad thing. Personally, what I like about them is that oftentimes there is a certain level of quality from a product or service associated with the Ayala brand. They're not perfect. I'm sure there are lots of controversial moves that this company has made that we have not covered here. But let's just say that when it comes to brands Ayala owns, no matter what it is, you're kind of assured that they wouldn't completely screw you over. And in a world where the big corporations are out to milk every cent off you, it's good to know that there are still monopoly-like companies like Ayala that's out there making an effort to help Filipinos get where they're supposed to go, without compromising comfort and the happiness of each one. And so that's about it. Now you know about the brand origin story of Ayala Corporation. If you enjoy this episode, check out our other videos. They're all about the origin stories of brands. And it would mean a lot if you can share this video and subscribe to our channel. You can also listen to this episode on our podcast. My name is Chris. I'll catch you again next time for another episode of Brand Origins.